Probably her biggest asset in politics.
Helen was a hanky person. She never used Kleenex. All of us said, "Hello, Don," or something. She said, "Hello, Donald."
She was not going to come to you and beg for your vote.
She'd say, "What do you have to say, Billy?"
Just this unusual person at a certain point in time.
Helen Putnam was a 4-term mayor of Petaluma, California, from 1965 to 1978. She was the first woman mayor of Petaluma, and her accomplishments were many. I'm going to tell you a few of those accomplishments in this episode of Petaluma Memories.
She was down to earth. You could talk to her anytime you wanted about anything. You could approach her about anything at all.
You always wanted to imitate her or be like her, or I couldn't be like her, but you know, you loved her joyful spirit. She had so many things that she said that were funny, and which made you laugh.
You know, you talked about Helen Putnam. She was a real fine lady, and she was my teacher and my wife's teacher, and she did wear the bracelets, and she was a supervisor, and she was just a good, smart person, very good for the community.
Helen was definitely she was a force. She was an incredible lady, a striking lady, carried herself well, but she was the first woman mayor of Petaluma.
She and my mother were very good friends, and I remember Helen Putnam. She had more bracelets than the jewelry store on her arms. Just wow. She was a very nice person. Dingling, you can always tell she was coming, but she had all these bracelets on.
Well, Helen first received her bracelet from her parents on her 16th birthday, and that started a tradition of another bracelet, and then pretty soon friends were adding to it, and that's what happened to me. Helen gave me my first bracelet in 1976 for the bicentennial. She has it engraved with my name and hers and the year. And then the next bracelet came after her mother passed away, and she wanted me to have a bracelet from her mother, so I have that engraved. And then she had me still another, and in the meantime, people are adding to mine, and just like friends and family, what have you. So I'm here just like Helen, and I love it. First time I met Helen Putnam was when she came on the school board in 1947, and I was offered a job in the superintendent of schools office. So that's when she was on the school board at that time.
Helen Putnam was my 8th grade teacher in school. I always liked Helen, even as a teacher, believe it or not.
My dad knew Helen Putnam, I believe, for one, because he was a trustee up at law school. And I think he was instrumental in hiring her as a principal. And the two of them would get into some pretty spirited discussions at times, but they both respected each other quite well.
My dad was a trustee at law school for about 15 years, and so during that time Helen Putnam became a teacher there, which sometimes one teacher also was the principal. It wasn't like it was, there weren't many people working there, you could say. And Helen Putnam either came as a teacher or as teacher and principal and so forth. And she was concerned about the children tripping over this little curb-like thing where the blacktop stopped and it went to like a cement curb, as I remember. And then down from there, it went into more of the field over toward the neighbor's place. So she was concerned the child might fall on that and, get scuffed up or something. So she wanted it smoothed over So she wrote this fancy letter to my father, and it said something to the effect of referring to this ledge as a precarious precipice for which the children could fall, or off of which the children could fall, or something like that, you know. So they did, as I remember, smooth it over. They made it smooth.
Helen asked for more money to run the school, and this trustee turned him down. So Helen left and went out to Two Rock, where she had a free hand, and pretty soon Two Rock was in the news and doing great things. So she had a way about her to manage and to please people.
Well, I think that this unique combination of brains, of the ability to bring disparate groups and people together to achieve a solution, and her self-confidence. She knew who she was. Helen Putnam knew who Helen Putnam was.
You always felt that Helen was honest with you. She could appreciate your position. She never verbally found fault with you. If she had her discussions with anyone, they were strictly between Helen and the other individual, whether it was staff or whoever it might be.
Well, I think she was encouraged by people. I think they figured that she was so fair, this would be a great person to have as a leader, which she was. She was a leader.
When you wonder what comes to mind about Helen other than the bracelets, it's tough because the bracelets always come first. But mostly I think it is Helen presiding, Helen's bearing, Helen being very calm, not rattled. She was just very, very, very much in control.
She was a great politician. She knew how to handle everybody, and she did an excellent job both in Petaluma politics and in county politics, and that was highly regarded.
I recall Helen Putnam very vividly. She was probably one of the more dynamic women that I've ever met in my life, and she was very active politically and very influential politically. And I say politically, and that's in a good sense. She was a very charming person, and she helped this city growth from 1965 on because she seemed to bridge the gap between all different elements of the population. It's something we don't see anymore.
She was a leader. I mean, you can take a lot of stuff, but that kind of comes down to it. She was a leader, and a good leader, and she did a lot for our community. And you know, that's the type of person she was.
Well, Helen Putnam came on the scene before I came to town, but the stories I heard was she has been very active in the Petaluma School Board and was also on the State School Boards Association and was scheduled to be the president the following year. Well, some of the more conservative people in town, Helen was a Democrat, some of the more conservative people here in town, I guess, got her kicked off the school board in the election. So Helen's revenge was she then proceeded then to run for mayor against the incumbent mayor, who was a friend of the people who had opposed her in the school board, and she won.
When she was mayor of this town, she got this town moving, and people respected her. They loved her, and she was class act. She really was.
Helen Putnam, or Madam Mayor as she was known in the community, had many accomplishments. We're going to boil those down to the most important. In 1971, Helen Putnam spearheaded the Petaluma Plan of Limited Growth. When she called on the public for support, she got an 80% yes vote. This was historical. It was the first limited growth plan in the United States. The construction industry, of course, sued the city. They didn't like this. They sued the city in 1973, and that suit was appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The city won against unshackled growth with a moratorium and a limit on the number of houses that could be built each year. The courts said the city had the right to determine its rate of growth. Helen called it an honest system of controlling growth that allowed the city to catch up on infrastructure.
She was a second grade school teacher and a principal, and she ran the city council much the same way, and she campaigned much the same way. She would listen to people, she'd tell them when she thought they were wrong, but she would always listen to people. She was just very personable, very personal. What we call getting votes retail. You know, she didn't do mass mailing, stuff like that. She did a lot of personal work.
She was always ready to listen. She would always disagree if she felt she had to disagree, but she was always agreeable. She listened to everything. I think the basis being that she was a school teacher. It's to her credit.
I loved, Helen was forever a school teacher, and I guess I was forever the nurse on the board, you know. And so we laughed as we were attracted to certain things. I used to chuckle because people at the county, some of them remembered Helen as a teacher. And one of them, Don Hitt, our public works director, I think had been her student. Well, all of us said, "Hello, Don," or something. She said, "Hello, Donald." She used his full name, and then we'd all chuckle, you know, it was so pleasant. So Mr. Head went ahead and put on us, gave us a responsibility of choosing the colors on the county bus system. And Helen and I laughed. So we actually went out and had our picture taken in front of the bus when it was finished. We chose the rainbow colors, but for fun, we turned them upside down, you know, and Don never quite forgave us for doing that, but we couldn't help but chuckle. I think they still use the colors, you know, so I guess it took as such, but we had a laugh about that.
We knew each other well enough that I was, you know, still a youth when she was around and recognized me growing up and so on. So even when I go up to testify before the Board of Supervisors, she'd say, you know, "What do you have to say, Billy?" Not Dr. Cordham or Bill Cordham. Or
To give you an idea of Helen's personality and how she interacted with people, if you just look at this picture, this particular picture was taken in 1973 after we were elected. And there's Fred Mattei, who was a local businessman who's on the city council. Here's some young guy, I don't have any idea who he is. Here's Helen Putnam, and here's Bob Bruner, another local businessman who was on the city council. As you can see, we look like we're facing a firing squad. He's barely into it. Helen is already projecting, showing how interested she is, and just showing her personality and how it affected everything she did. And then here's another picture which shows Helen being, I guess you call it an action photo here. And there's a man who had a grocery store, as you can see a grocery store here, named Bob Mallett, a local businessman. And she was, I think she loved to dance, and she certainly was active. But you can see that personality showing through right there. I mean, this was not just a picture for her, this was her personality. And of course, education was her big issue before she got on the city council. And here are some members of the community and school board. There was a Dr. Clement Stimson, a Dr. Hall Weston, who were here in the picture. Norman Neal, another businessman. Here is Helen, and she was probably, in this picture, was probably head of the school board. And I imagine they're looking at a model of a new school that they're going to build in Petaluma. And you can see that everybody else is fairly happy, but Helen's personality is just flashing through. I think she was probably very happy they were getting a new school, but that was just her personality. And then here's one where, here's Richard Nixon, and I'm not sure what his capacity was then, whether he was senator, vice president, or whatever, but as you can see, Helen is not intimidated by talking to a power broker in Washington. As you can see, she felt she was equal, and she was. I mean, she was very sure of herself, very sure of what she stood for, and it came out in all her pictures. And nobody was being coy or anything like that. She was She was interested in she's probably talking about, we need a new school in Petaluma. What are you going to do about it? You know, she was probably already pushing for it. But that's her personality, and that was probably her biggest asset in politics.
Petaluma is growing very rapidly. I was on the school board at the time, and we had triple sessions. We were building 1,500 homes in 1 year on the east side. Kids would go to school and they have to line up to get in the bathroom, for goodness sake. And there was real problems with this sudden growth and not the facilities to take care of them. So I, as a board member, Petaluma High School board member, I was a K through 12. I went to the city council and said, you've got to slow this thing down. We can't keep up with you. And they were very aware of it, but they didn't do much about it.
Once the whole environmental plan design got rolling, I think Helen was one of the first ones to come on board and give support to it. Now, it's just because there was political opportunity here, because it made Petaluma famous, amongst other things. But she was not one of those that I would characterize as just waiting for a chance to unravel the whole plan. And there were definitely those on the council. Looking back, you know, the legacy, if you will, the impact of the limited growth plan, it basically stopped, really was runaway growth. In 1970, they issued something like 1,000 building permits for houses in town. The growth plan became 500 people a year, 500 homes a year plan. We never ever really built that many, 500. And then back in the 80s, or late 70s and 80s, when we started building 500, everybody went nuts that 500 was too many. But the legacy is that if we'd gone on, we could have put another 5,000 to 6,000 homes on the east side in another couple of years. And the problem was, it wasn't that they were building that many homes. The problem was that they were doing no planning.
Some people don't realize that it was a growth limit. All they were trying to do, she and the city council, was to limit the growth so it wouldn't go beyond such a big point that we couldn't control it.
We went through the limited growth plan with her leadership and so forth. So that wound up in the Supreme Court, where we wanted to limit the growth and regulate the growth within the city. And of course, the developers didn't like that because they thought it was their land, they could do anything they wanted to it. Well, as it turned out, Petaluma won the suit, and the rest of the country followed. We could determine the kind of growth we wanted in our towns. Helen Putnam passed away in 1984 when she was supervisor of our district. The Argus-Courier obituary called her Petaluma's political matriarch, and that she was. Helen was a doer, and she got it done. In response to her death, the city dedicated Petaluma Plaza Park in her name. The County of Sonoma dedicated Petaluma Regional Park, 171 acres, in her name. And perhaps most important to Helen would be that the California League of Cities initiated an award, an annual award, the Helen Putnam Award for Excellence in Government.
Back then, she was a precursor of great women that came after, but she broke a lot of boundaries when she came into politics, and very well loved in Petaluma.
She had a profound impact, and if you go back and look at the history of it and where Helen was during her time, you might find her in Petaluma, you might find her in Sacramento, but you might find her in Washington, D.C. as well, meeting very famous people. She was just that dynamic. There won't be another Helen Putnam that comes along too quickly like her.
I think Helen, if Helen were around today, she may be appalled at our political climate. Helen was a Democrat in her day. I think Helen today would probably be a very conservative person, because life is just At least the politics of Petaluma has gone very much to the left. Former leftists are now conservatives and so forth. But would she be successful? I think so, just because her success depended an awful lot just on her personality, her bearing, and she was just a successful person, whatever she challenged. She challenged for state school boards, would have had that if she'd won the election. She was president of the League of California Cities.
Well, Helen Putnam passed way too soon and very quickly from the scene. She was diagnosed with cancer and had a successful surgery because they were able to remove the tumor, but it led to complications, and she died very suddenly after what appeared to be successful surgery. So it was a huge shock to the community, because not only was she supervisor at that time, but she'd been such a part of the fabric of the second district, which was her supervisorial district, and Petaluma since the 60s, the early 60s, and not just in office, but also as a teacher and a principal of a local school, in a school in the county, but still a local school. And so I know I was shocked. I knew she'd been ill, and I knew she'd been in the hospital, but when I heard that she'd passed away, I couldn't believe it. I believe it was like the 2nd of July, and it was right before the 4th of July, and that's when she used to always have the flag raising ceremony for all the kids. It was one of the things that she did very successfully, and so we went ahead and had it. Me and Petaluma went ahead and had it, but it wasn't the same without her. And I think it just stunned everybody. It was just, she always appeared so healthy, and she was so dynamic and so, like I said, her presence, her eyes, and she'd be at a meeting and you'd pick her out right away. And for her to be gone instantly, had there been some long-term knowledge of her illness, and people could have gotten prepared for it, but they weren't. It was a huge, huge shock.
I can tell you the day that she died, I had gone over to, if I can tell you, I went to the hospital to see her, and she said, "Barbara," and she had just had her surgery for cancer, and she said, "Would you possibly be able to go up to the board and get the agenda for next week's meeting?" And I said, "Sure, I could do that." And she said, "And on the way, if you wouldn't mind, stop at Macy's and buy me some perfume." She said there was a gorgeous girl in a white dress on a porch in sort of a southern style home. And she said they're advertising white linen. So, and she said, "I'd like a bottle." And I said, "Oh, okay," and I'm feeling really good. So I stopped at Macy's, got the agenda, got the perfume, and that day the little free gift they gave you was a white linen hanky. When Helen was a hanky person, she never used Kleenex, always a hanky. So I get back to the hospital, and I started to walk down the hall. And I thought the nurses were acting kind of funny, and I thought they were going to say, "You're not allowed because you're not family," and I was ready to, and she had just passed away. As I got off the elevator, she had just passed away. So I wear white linen perfume to this day, and I put the hanky in the casket with her. But that was Helen, right up to the last minute. She wanted the agenda and the perfume. I loved it.
When we were in the office together, we thought nothing of dropping it. We were next door to each other. We thought nothing of stopping as we went by or came in the morning and chatting. So that was a very friendly, congenial kind of relationship that we had. And I have to admit, I missed it terribly when she didn't come back.
Ladies and gentlemen, I treasure the opportunity to come to Coronado and Virginia Bridge. You know I treasure the honor to come to Coronado. I'm delighted to have been invited to come before you this morning as president of the League of California Cities. And incidentally, we represent all 414 cities in the state of California. Every city in the state is a member, big and small. I might tell you that I'm honored to be the president of the League of California Cities. In the long history of the League, I am the first woman to be its president. I enjoy the opportunity of working with citizens from every city in the state. And I think it's quite incredible when you realize that coming from a community as small as Petaluma is,